up your engine!
Well, it was inevitable being a GM product. They've recalled the Chevy Corvettes because of their flying frunks. The engine isn't in the front anymore, it's in the middle. So they got the trunk in the front, hood, and they call it a frunk. Well, they have to recall them because it can pop open while you're driving down the road. Oh, and here's some of their fixes. This is rather hilarious. The car sees that the hood is not latched and come off. It gives you a warning, and then it limits your speed to 82 miles an hour. Like 70 miles an hour and your trunk comes up in the front, hood pops open. It's pretty dangerous too. But now they're going to reduce that to 26 miles an hour instead of 82. I love to see who's the engineer that came up with that brilliant idea. Well, we'll warn you, and we'll limit the speed to only 82. Like you can't see if the hood opens at 82, right? But now they're going to reduce it to 26 with the new software. And they're also going to modify the key fob so you can't hit it to open it up when you're driving around. But I mean, come on now. Couldn't they have thought of that in the first place? This isn't rocket science. Now, they're saying that the key fob will be, to quote them, modified to reduce the likelihood of inadvertent hood release actuations. We got lawyers involved in this one, that's for sure, right? And all that kind of stuff. You think they can make a hood that just closes and stays closed? We're not talking about rocket science here. We've had hoods for a long time in cars. And I never had one that the hood popped open. I'm assuming this is the tip of the iceberg, too. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other stuff that goes on. Something that simple can't be designed. Luckily, they didn't sell that many of them yet, so there's only a few thousand of them out. So it's not like they're having to fix millions of cars. But, you know, you'd think they could have thought that one up before they sold them to people so the hoods wouldn't pop open. Just have a latch that locks and holds in place. That's the problem, that they got all this crap on a key fob, right? Why do you need a key fob to open your hood? You can just pull a knob inside the car and make it a lot simpler, but no, when it's all electrified and computerized, guess what happens? Things like this. Crazy stuff happens. I mean, sometimes, why don't you just have a little cable to open and close the hood? It makes it a lot simpler. We've been doing that for a long time. Do you really need to computerize the opening of your trunk? It's really gotten to kind of a point of absurdity with these engineers. They do it because they can. Is it just me, or is the entire world getting dumber by the second? Tesla is now seeking approval for a sensor that could detect children left in hot cars. Maybe they need a sensor to detect stupid people that shouldn't even be driving cars and shouldn't even have children if they're leaving them in cars. That reminds me, I grew up in Niagara Falls. Okay. Now, when you went to the rapids over the edge of the falls, when I was young, you could just walk around. We even swam in the stuff. I mean, if you know how to swim, there were areas that there was no backwash, so it was safe. But then later, as I grew up, they started putting signs, warning, dangerous water. Okay, you're looking at Niagara Falls. Do they really need a sign that says warning, dangerous waters? Unless they gotta have a sensor in a car to warn you that you left your kid in the car. Sheesh, I mean, what kind of parents are people turning into these days? I always laugh with Uber and everybody delivering food to people. I said, well, one day they're going to have people come and chew it for you, too. But, of course, Tesla's got to have their cutting-edge technology, and some nut came up with the idea, let's put a sensor if people leave their children in the car. It's like that one, somebody was working, I believe, that you don't want to leave your pets in there. So if the dog barks, you know, would roll the windows down or something so they wouldn't get so hot. Our society has indeed gone 100% bonkers, or at least 99.9%. Marky Mark says, Scotty, I know better from your great videos than my sister does, and she wants to use Dodge Challenger. Any tips on getting a used one? What mileage, tranny engine to stay away from? The fast cars, they go fast, they also fall apart fast. I have a customer who bought one of those things, and she bought it with a V6 engine, used. And it's halfway decent. It's still a Dodge. A lot of electronic crap will break as it goes. But the V6 engine, it puts out decent horsepower. The big Hemi V8 puts out insane horsepower. And as they have made them more horsepower, they have designed the engines wrong. And the cams all wear out because of these various design flaws in them. So you wouldn't want to buy a used V8 one with any kind of mileage, 100,000 or more, because then the engines start to burn oil and clacking and fall apart, and it costs at least $5,000 to fix them. So if she absolutely positively has to buy one, have her find a V6 one, because the guys that generally buy the V6s, they don't drive like such maniacs. They're not doing burnouts all the time, and the engines actually have a history of lasting longer than the V8s because they didn't modify the six-cylinder engines to get the insane horsepower that the V8s do, so the cams in those aren't wearing out like the ones in the V8s are. JSNV007 says, should I get a 2020 Honda Sport 2-liter 10-speed automatic or a 2020 Volkswagen Jetta Autobahn 7-speed DSG or 6-speed manual? Love your content. I drove them, but I'm confused. Looking to finance new from dealership. Thanks. You want something that's going to last. Get that Honda. Do not buy a Jetta. The Jettas are just endless money pits as they age, as all Volkswagens are. They're fast, they're fun to drive, those ones, the zippy ones, but they fall apart as they age. That's just how Volkswagens are these days. They don't hold up like the ancient 1960s and earlier Volkswagens. They didn't have much horsepower, but they'd run forever and they were simple. They're high-tech monsters. Everything's plastic and they all break. Out of those, you definitely want to get the Honda. The Honda's 10 times. The Volkswagen will probably last 10 times as long too before it finally breaks. Don't even think about spending that kind of money on a Volkswagen unless you like throwing your money away. Thomas ETX says, got a good one for you. Got an 08 Jeep Wrangler, 3.8 liter, 253,000 miles. Error codes P0300 and P2302. I got new plugs, wires, coil packs, new camshaft position sensor replaced, 1 fuel injectors. We can't figure out what is wrong. It keeps having the same codes. The big issue is that the check engine light doesn't tell us that number 4 cylinder is not firing. But when we check it, it has no spark. All right. Well, you're going to need a new computer. I can tell you that right off the bat. It's a Jeep Wrangler. And they have weak computers to begin with. And if you're having a problem like that and you got no fire, but the computer isn't saying that you're getting no fire, that you have no misfires on that cylinder, the computer shot. Or the wiring. Of course, you want to check the wiring from that injector back to the computer. Maybe there's a short in the wiring or the ground. Check that closely. But from my experience with those Jeeps, the computers go bad all the time. And if the wiring is straightforward, you just unplug both ends, measure the wiring resistance, make sure that it's correct. And if it is, your computer's shot. And I can just about guarantee you the computer's shot. I see that all the time in those. Now, if you're lucky, disconnect the wires from the computer. If you disconnect it and you see that some of the stuff is green, that's corrosion. Then get spray electrical cleaner and clean all the green corrosion and plug it back in. Maybe it'll work. Sometimes they will corrode. But with what yours is doing, odds are the computer itself is shot. Accurate Pilot says, I used Barr's head gasket leak as Scotty's recommended, and it worked. Thanks for the advice. Head gasket external coolant leak is now plugged, and I got back from a 220-mile drive with no signs of coolant leaking. Well, great. Now, I like the Barr's head gasket sealer. They sell it at AutoZone. It's around $20 for the thing. In your case, it will often work because you had an external coolant leak. When it's leaking on the outside of the head gasket and dripping out, there's hardly any pressure coming out there except for the coolant. So you got the coolant. That's maybe what? 15 psi, 15 pounds per square inch pressure, and it's on the outside. So that's all there is. Now, if it had been on the inside between the piston ring and the coolant jackets, then you got thousands of psi when the gasoline explodes. Odds are it's not going to seal that leak because there's so much more pressure. But whenever you have an external coolant leak, those sealants often work excellent. You got a little radiator hole, it's externally leaking, they're great for fixing stuff like that. But like I say, if you got an internal leak between the piston compression and the water jackets, it's not going to generally work then, or if it does, it won't last long because it's just too much pressure. 15 psi pressure in the radiator isn't that bad, but thousands of psi in the pistons going up and down, they generally don't work that long when they're inside there. Wellington123 says, I want to buy an Actron Auto Scanner Plus CP9180 like you use, but they're sold out on Amazon. What's an acceptable new substitute? Okay, well, realize that Actron is bought out and it's now owned by Bosch, B-O-S-C-H. It's a German company, but there's also an American company that's a separate company. And they're selling the same type of scanners, only under the Bosch name. So just check to see what kind of stuff you want. Look at their scanners. See what kind of money you want to spend. Or if you really want, go to eBay. There's going to be plenty of those CP9180s and equivalents for sale that are used. And the thing about them is they generally last forever. People don't use scanners 24 hours a day, so they hardly have any use of them. The only thing that goes bad is the battery, a 9-volt battery. So you could probably find a used one. They're excellent scanners. There's no arguing that. Just realize that as time goes on, they're not going to upgrade any of the Actrons because Bosch bought them out. Now they're going to call everything Bosch, and they're never going to support all the old stuff that the Actron made. I found that myself. My old Actron scanner won't work on the brand new cars except generically because they don't give upgrades for them because they're not making them anymore. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.